This presentation covers predicting medical device safety recalls using publicly available data. Presented by RETEC staff, Director of Product Management, John Lawrence, and Data and Information Analyst, Balash Hossain.
I'll just start off with an overview of the publicly available data and some challenge that we had. And just naturally looking at the data that's out there, which led us into some database creation. Once I get through that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Balash, who will spend some time talking about the predictive recall analytics methodology that we're applying, and then further cover some details regarding the observations, including devices which are at highest risk of recall, and also how to watch for leading indicators of a recall. So the medical device data challenge, as in the title of this, talking about using publicly available data. Okay, so currently there are many different data sets available that contain information on medical devices and can help with use cases such as risk analysis, regulatory intelligence, post-market surveillance. But it's a very time-consuming process to comb through all these sources. This is also magnified by the fact that these databases are not very user-friendly and can be difficult to search successfully. Furthermore, the data is not normalized or standardized, which prevents trending and benchmarking, which is obviously something we're trying to do here. So we recognize this as a problem and come up with a solution on how to better leverage this publicly available data. So to overcome these barriers, we created a database which connects over a dozen of these data sources, including FDA approvals and clearances, and event data like adverse events, recalls, and warning letters. We use GMDN, UDIs, unique device identification, device listing, and product code information to categorize the products and events. Additionally, we assembled all references to a particular product into a single entry. If you see the word cloud on the right, it shows how many variations on a single product name and manufacturer are possible. And this actual example here is modeled after actual variations of a real product that we observed in MAUDE. So the next slide here, we'll get into how we went about creating this database. We start with identifying all the medical device companies by looking at the FDA establishment registrations and owner operators, along with the FDA approval and clearance applicants, using those as our primary sources. We then use the proprietary LexisNexis corporate affiliations database, something that obviously we have access to as being part of LexisNexis, to help identify ultimate parents, subsidiaries, and generally how the companies are relating to each other. Then we evaluated all the pre-market approvals and humanitarian device exemptions for Class 3 products, 510K clearances along with de novos and the good ID listings for Class 2 products. Assuming this should give us essentially the universe of Class 2 and Class 3 medical devices, as long as the manufacturers are, of course, following the FDA mandated regulations. Finally, we attempted to match each event to the appropriate products and companies. These events included FDA device listings, adverse event reports from the MAUDE database, the FDA recalls, warning letters, and more. So this is quite the process of getting this all together, but the end results we're very happy with here. So just lastly, to go over the strength of the database itself. So we've been designing and curating this actually since 2016. This has been quite an ongoing project and initiative getting this together. Currently, we have about over 27,000 companies with an average of 1,400 being added each month. These companies have a combined 129,078 Class 2 and 3 medical device products, with around 300 additionals being added each month. And to highlight a few of our event sources, we have over 173,000 approvals and clearances going all the way back to 1970, over 24,000 recalls, with an average of 120 individual recalls being added each month. Now, finally, we have over 9 million adverse event reports, and that's really that's starting since 2011 going forward. So it's only since 2011. So after getting all this together, being happy with the results of the database, we're finally able to have a source to start using, so referring to some of this trending and benchmarking that we're referring to. So what I'd like to do now is hand it over to my colleague Balash, who can talk about the answer to that question in the beginning here. Okay, now we have the publicly available data curated nicely. Could it be leveraged to predict medical device recalls? Balash?
Yep. So we're going to transition to the second challenge where we focus on recalls here. So we've identified the safety and event information for devices in the U.S. market. So this accounts for 39% of the global market share. And with that, here we can see a general trend for the past 2 decades. So in this chart, you'll see a blue line, and that represents new FDA approvals and clearance submissions starting from 2010. The red line represents the number of individual recall events, and the green represents the unique number of products. So that condenses down certain recalls, which might be multiple for one specific product. And we can see that as more and more devices continue to enter the market, the number of recalls follow that same trend, and it increases. So with the medical device, with the medical device market expected to grow at a compounded annual growth rate of 6.1% starting in 2021, we can also expect recalls to follow this similar upward trend. So this means that understanding the trend in safety and quality is more important than ever. Additionally, there are patterns in the data that pinpoints to the most common reasons that a medical device product could be recalled. And according to the data, we're seeing that the most common root cause is device design followed by a non-conforming material. And this is pulled from the FDA recall reports. So the question is, how can we mitigate the risk of a product being recalled? And this is important because these device recalls are expensive for all stakeholders, from the manufacturer all the way to the end user. And using that as an example, the manufacturer can have damage to their reputation, and they can also see slowdowns in research and development, while the patient can suffer from serious adverse events. So the question is, how can we mitigate this risk? How do we turn public data into meaningful insights to help with risk and post-market surveillance activity? And can future prediction signals be obtained by looking into past data trends? And we think the answer to both questions is yes, and it involves leveraging the data that we have with the help of a machine learning algorithm. So this is a general overview of our process. We took our data and created a model that can predict if a recall will happen in the next 365 days of a product's life cycle. So the features of the model are generated using the information from the database that we put together, and we give the features to the model, which then gives us a trained model. And we can then test the accuracy of the model by using a test data set, which was kept separate from the training data set. So this is another representation of what the data looks like going into the model. You'll see that the first 3 columns represents the input for the model. These are the individual features that we put together using the data from the last 3 years since the day when the prediction is made. And the last column represents the output, whether or not the device will be recalled in the next 365 days. And this value can range from 0 to 1, which translates to a yes or no prediction. The green rows represents the data that was used to measure the performance of the model. So we give the features to the model and compare the predicted results with the actual results. And the last 3 row represents the data that we use to predict the future. We give the data from the previous 3 years in hopes that the model can predict what will happen in the next 365 days. So to measure the success of the model, we used a confusion matrix, and this shows us the number of true positives, true negatives, false positives, and false negatives. So here's an example of 1,100 items. We also look at the specificity, which in our case describes the accuracy of predicting when there is no recall, and sensitivity, which describes accuracy when predicting a recall. So as you may know, only a very small percentage of the overall number of products gets recalled each year, and thus our model is unbalanced and favors no recall prediction. So because of this, we look at the balanced accuracy, which is the average of the specificity and sensitivity. So here we can see the results of our model when we back tested the data from 2019. So we used the data from the 3 years prior to 2019 to predict what would happen in 2019. And then we compared the prediction to what actually happened in 2019. And you can see that the balanced accuracy for the model was 82.1%. At the time that at the time of the test, in the beginning of 2019, there were over 103 unique medical devices in our database. And out of all of those devices, the prediction model identified about 16,000 or 16% as being at risk of having a recall. In actuality, there were 313 total products with recalls. And out of those 313, the model correctly identified 250 or 80% of the correct device which were recalled by the model. So in addition to the back testing, we also were able to look at the real world performance. And we did this by looking back at a prediction that we made back in May 28th of 2020. And on that date, the model predicted that out of over 104,000 products, which we had at that time in our database, 13,760 of them were identified as being at risk. And this represented about 13% of all the products at that time. And then once we got to May 28th of 2021, we were able to look at what actually happened. And we found out that there had been a total of 341 recalls. We can also look at how the performance varied by looking at, by grouping the devices into different review panels. So if we look at only orthopedic devices on the left, you'll notice that our balanced accuracy is actually lower than if we only looked at cardiovascular products. The balanced accuracy of orthopedic products is 70%, while the balanced accuracy is much higher at 88% for orthopedic products. And we can see that the model correctly identified 68 out of the 70 products which were recalled in between those two time periods. And we can also drill down further and look at the individual recalls and then the root cause and all the other details. And we can also look at the specific product and the different data related to the product, such as the class, review panel, etc. So here in this chart, we can see how the prediction changed over time since that May 2020 prediction. So we just ran the model as we were getting new data. And you can see that overall, you can see that the devices in the orthopedic, radiology, and cardiovascular groups have a much higher risk of recall than other groups on the market. So overall, you can see that more than 22% of all products from these three categories were predicted to be at risk of having a recall, compared to only 14% of all the other products. So with the recall prediction model, we can continuously monitor how these risk changes as we add new data to our database. We also measured the performance by calculating the area under the curve of the ROC curve. And our value of this metric is 0.857%. So our testing has shown that the recall prediction model can identify a small minority of products that will be responsible for having a large majority of the recalls. So if you can imagine that these boxes here represents different products, our model will identify a small subset of the products that are most at risk of having a recall. And our results show that most of the recalls that do occur tend to fall within this small subgroup that we identify. So having access to this information can help mitigate the negative aspects of a recall event. And it may be possible to use the predictions as a part of a larger risk assessment strategy. And this analysis can be created for individual products as well as groups of products. And with additional data sets and with more data coming in, it may be possible to improve the accuracy beyond what we can achieve at this time. And as an example of how this can be useful, here's a case study from the perspective of a quality engineer at a medical device manufacturer. So a simple approach to risk analysis might include first identifying the potential hazards and failure modes that might occur with a device or similar devices. And second, there is a need to determine how likely they are to occur. And this is where a prediction model can be useful. And third, you need to determine how severe the problem will be. This must be done at a regular cadence throughout the year. Risk management is a continuous process that underpins the entire medical device lifecycle. And risk analysis must occur at both the beginning and end of the risk management process. So the data set that we are using to predict recalls also powers one of our commercial applications called Navigator for medical device. It's available via a subscription model, and the application gives you access to most of the data that we talked about in this presentation. So please get in touch with us if you'd like to learn more about this project or see how the dataset can benefit your organization.